Hi again, everyone anyone who's just sort of tuning in. My name is Ethan, and today we'll be talking about exam preparation and with a particular focus on building student confidence in this type of course. And we'll be looking at some tools that you can use with your students to help them feel more confident and comfortable with the exam. And the three that we're going to look at today are scaffolding and differentiation, peer and self-assessment, and then we'll finish by looking at exam conditions, sort of this idea of simulating exam conditions in class. And as you can see from the screen, this talk will involve some examples from the new Ready For books, the new 4th edition of these books. So as many of you know, the B2 book has been out for a little while, but the Ready For C1 Advanced book is hot off the presses. It's just been released. So it's very exciting to have both of these books out in print. Very excited to see them. So, and if you're interested in learning more about them, there's some information about that sort of after the session, if you'd like to learn more about these books. So, but before we talk about those tools, I thought maybe we could just start with a question here in the chat box. So in your opinion, how important do you think it is to build student confidence in exam preparation courses? How important is this to think about? Is it not very important? Is it kind of important? Is it really important? Just let me know in the chat box. Got plenty of C's, some A's. I'm seeing lots of C's, mostly C's. People are adding adverbs extremely. Yes, some B's. Okay, so as you can probably tell, because I made this presentation, I think it's important. I think it's something we should really be thinking about. I'm definitely a C person. I think it's important because I think we can all think of times in our life when feeling confident about something made a difference. It helped us succeed. And that's what we really want in an exam preparation course. We want students to succeed, and we want to help them as much as we can to reach those life goals, as I mentioned before, which are associated with this type of exam. So the first one we're going to talk about is scaffolding and differentiation. So to start this section, I just want to share with you a quote from one of my students. So I'll sort of paint you a picture. This is when you're in class and you say, okay, everybody, open your books to page 50 or whatever. Today we're going to be doing listening part 4. And there's one student who goes, oh, I'm terrible at this part of the exam. I'm sure you've probably heard students say that kind of thing before in your classes. And I think there's probably a lot of reasons why a student might feel that way about a particular part of the exam. But over the years, I started to think that maybe in some respects, it was actually my fault as a teacher for not supporting students enough at the beginning. I started to realize that, that at the beginning of an exam preparation course, really the most important thing is to support students and sort of try to create as much kind of a high degree of success the first time that students do an exam task, because if they do an exam task and it's too hard and they get them all wrong, it leaves a lasting impression. It sort of creates a bad first impression, if you will. And we all know that first impressions are powerful. If we meet somebody and they're a bit rude to us, they may in fact not be a rude person at all, but that idea is going to kind of stick in our minds. And so one thing I've done over the years, I've sort of made an effort to try to create a good first impression of exam tasks, so get off on the right foot. And you'll find that in the Ready For series, they've also taken this perspective as well. So the first time that that students meet an exam task in the book, there's some extra scaffolding sort of around the task. It's not just an exam task. So in this particular case, this listening part 4, you'll see that the first question that students have to answer, they don't actually answer it listening, which is interesting. They have a look at an extract from the audio script, and they and they think about which answer is correct, sort of based on what's written there. And more importantly, actually, much more importantly, they also have a look at the wrong answers and sort of try to think about why they might be wrong. And basically what the author, Roy Norris, from this B2 book is doing is raising students' awareness of distraction in the exam. And he's doing that right from the very start of the book, because it is a very important thing to understand if you're going to do well on this type of Cambridge exam. And you can see that there's also this sort of useful information box here at the bottom, what to expect on the exam. And so, yeah, so this is the idea. We're sort of holding the student's hand a bit at the beginning, sort of raising their awareness of important features of the exam task. However, as I said, over the years, I've really sort of focused on this idea of creating a good impression. And I find that with some classes, with some students, maybe the scaffolding isn't quite enough. That this is obviously very useful, but maybe students need a bit more. And so one sort of tool that I've started to use quite a lot, particularly at the beginning of a course, is the audio script itself, sort of the full audio script. And yeah, I think that the first time you do a listening test, there's really no reason not to have the students just read the audio script as they do it, if you think that they need that kind of support. And there's and sort of providing a little bit less support, you could have them, for example, look at the audio script afterwards before you check the answers. And that way they can sort of discuss their answers in pairs and sort of talk about what they heard versus sort of what's written, and sort of confirm their answers before you go over them in class. Because at that point, hopefully, the students have most of the answers right, and they sort of feel like they've succeeded in that exam task. Of course, you've been helping them along the way, but they have this feeling of success by the end of the activity. And one thing I was going to say, that audio scripts are great for scaffolding at the beginning of a course, but they can also be a very interesting and useful differentiation tool. So of course, differentiation is this idea of sort of providing the right level of challenge or support based on sort of how strong students are. So with particular classes or particular students within classes, you can have some students using the audio script and some students not using it. You know, it's very easy to do that in class, right? Like some students can just have the audio script open, others can choose not to use it. So that way, sort of within the same class, you're providing sort of support and challenge to, according to the student's needs. Another good differentiation tool is just simply eliminating some of the answers. So this is sort of information you can make available to students before they do the task. And yeah, so the idea is that you can sort of make, sort of eliminate one. So we've been looking at this listening part 4. And here they have 3 options. If you eliminate one of them, you've definitely increased the chances of them getting them correct. They're still doing the exam task as an exam task, but you've just sort of pushed them towards the right answer, and you've hopefully ensured a higher level of success. So the first time they do it, or even the second time, or even the third time, just to make sure that that they don't kind of get to the point where they feel frustrated, they feel like they're sort of bad at a part of the exam. We want to sort of support our students as much as we need to. And this is another nice differentiation one. So you can have some students doing this with the help and without the help. So you could have sort of this information on a handout that students could sort of turn over if they want to turn it over, and they can turn it over if they want a little bit of extra help. So you can sort of make that help available in a subtle sort of way in class. So I've been focusing on multiple choice questions for a reason, because multiple choice questions are pretty common in the Cambridge exam. So just looking at the B2 first exam, we've been looking at listening part 4, that's a multiple choice. But also listening part 1 is multiple choice. There's a multiple choice task in the use of English, and there's another one in the reading section. So those sort of techniques or tools that I just showed you, they're sort of easily sort of transferable to other parts of the exam. And sort of more generally, when you kind of get this, sort of mindset of trying to support students as much as they need, particularly at the beginning of the course, I think you'll start seeing sort of other ways to make other exam tests slightly easier, or maybe supporting students in other ways, just to make sure that, yeah, they have a good experience with the exam tasks at the very beginning. So we've sort of looked at how providing the correct level or the adequate level of support at the beginning of a course can help students build confidence. We're going to move on to peer and self-assessment now. So this is basically what it sounds like. Basically, instead of the teacher always being the one evaluating the students and providing feedback, we can sort of train our students and encourage them to assess themselves, or even assess a peer in class, another student. And I found this quite effective in exam preparation, in the context of exam preparation in particular. And I've used it a lot with the writing in particular, and that's what we're going to look at today. But before we do that, I thought that if you could just take a moment and tell me in the chat box, is peer and self-assessment something you do with your students? How often do you do it? Do you never do it? Do you do it sometimes? Do you do it regularly? Okay, lots of beats. Lots of beats. Some seats. Yeah, so it sounds like for many of you, this is definitely something you're already doing. So I think we're sort of on the same page that it's something useful to do. Yeah, just to let you know that until actually not that long ago, I was definitely an A person. I had never really done this before. I'd been teaching for years, but just never tried it. It never occurred to me. But in the last few years, I've definitely started doing it more and more. And as I said, I found it been interestingly successful in helping students improve their performance. And as I said, I think that's particularly true for the writing in particular. So on the screen here is the sort of official assessment criteria from Cambridge. This comes from sort of the publicly available handbook for teachers. And it's very nice for Cambridge to make this information available to everybody, particularly for writers like me that have to create exam preparation materials. But even for the average teacher, it's really useful to have this information, because it means that when we are giving students feedback on their writing, we can give them feedback in the same sort of categories, or thinking about the same things that are going to be assessed on the official exam by official examiners. However, this information, we can't give it to students. It's just not written for students. In fact, it's not even really written for teachers. Well, it is, but I think they could probably do a better job. I mean, sometimes you kind of have to investigate a little bit and see what they mean by, for example, the target reader is on the whole informed. You sort of have to figure out exactly what that means. In any case, we can't give it to students, even if we wanted to. But what we can do is we can kind of mediate this information, and we can change it. We can sort of select criteria that we want to focus on, and we can share that assessment criteria with students in the form of something very sort of student-friendly, like a checklist. And this particular checklist for a proposal, it comes from the teacher's book for the Ready for C1 Advanced book. And I think you'll find that throughout the B2 and the C1 teachers books, I've included some suggestions for creating checklists and other forms of peer and self-assessment, particularly for the writing, as I said, because I think this can be very useful. So I'll sort of just walk you through how I would introduce this in class. So you have a look at this and you say, well, that's pretty easy to understand. I could probably just give that to my students, and they could just start assessing themselves. However, actually, self-assessment is not easy. It's actually sort of hard, and it's something that students need training with. So I think we sort of need to take baby steps when we think about self-assessment. So I think that one sort of baby step is to introduce the checklist, but then in class, have them practice with a model answer. Not their own writing, but one of these sample answers that's in the teacher's book. And also you can download this very easily from the Teachers Resource Center, which is sort of an online area with lots of really interesting and useful exam preparation sort of material, sort of extra things. And so you can get them to sort of maybe do this in pairs, that sort of discuss where they would sort of, how they would mark this sample answer. And then you can talk about it as a class and sort of say, well, you know, what were some examples of the appropriate register here? So we're talking about a proposal, so it has to be relatively formal, that kind of thing. And then they could go ahead and sort of write their own proposal and then sort of use the checklist to assess themselves. And the way I do this, I give the students the checklist and the task, and then they sort of hand in their piece of writing with the checklist. And then when I'm doing feedback, I'm basically checking the checklist and sort of saying, you know, to what extent I sort of agree or disagree with the marks that they've given themselves. And again, sort of through this process, students are really, they're really sort of internalizing the success criteria for the exam and sort of really focusing on what's going to help them get a good mark on the exam. And also sort of the better they get at this, the more confident they feel too. So they've written something, and before they even give it to me, they feel pretty, they feel pretty confident about it because they've assessed themselves a number of times and they feel like they're getting, they're really getting a good handle on what it means to write a good proposal and sort of what a good proposal looks like. So if you can get this far, if you can get students sort of self-assessing themselves during the course, you've done a lot of really valuable work, because when you think about it, on the exam day, the teacher is not going to be there to give them feedback, right? They have to give them, they have to give the examiners a piece of writing that is then going to go on and be marked. And you know, if students finish that piece of writing and they hand it in and they sort of know that it's good, that's going to feel very nice on exam day. There's not going to be sort of any surprises on exam day in that sense. So this idea of self-assessment, I think, is very useful, and I would really encourage you to sort of experiment with this if you haven't already. It sounds like many of you are already doing this kind of thing. But you can actually take this one step further, of course, and you can actually have students assess each other in class. So you can get students, for example, to do a piece of writing, bring it in, and then use a checklist like this in pairs and have them assess each other. And again, you'd think that sort of after going through this process of really understanding the assessment criteria, using the checklist to assess themselves, they would be, you know, very good at it. And they probably are. However, sort of peer assessment has its own sort of issues as well, its own difficulties. And one important one is sort of the affective side, the sort of emotional side of it. Because I think that unfortunately, if you kind of just ask students to do that kind of activity, a peer assessment activity, I think you'll find that sort of the first instinct, and I think this is perhaps just human nature, is for students to sort of focus on the negative. You know, they say, well, you spelled this word wrong, or yeah, you forgot this, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that introducing it again, sort of with baby steps, and sort of encouraging students to think about what constructive criticism actually looks like and how it works can be very valuable. And sort of you can avoid the problem of students having kind of a bad experience or having a negative experience. One particular sort of framework that I've used in class, or tool really, is called the ladder of feedback. It was developed by a group of researchers at Harvard University at their sort of graduate education program. And basically they just set out 4 steps. They set out 4 steps for students to go through when they're assessing a peer. So they would start by clarifying, so they would read it basically, and then just sort of ask any sort of quick questions they had about it. And then they would sort of quickly move on to valuing, and they would think about the positive. You know, they would say, well, I really liked how you used some really interesting vocabulary here. This paragraph is really well constructed. There's a nice topic sentence, and I like the supporting examples that you've used. And then sort of from there, they do move on to focusing on sort of negative things or things that could be improved, things that could be done better. And of course, that's an important part of giving somebody feedback. But however, there's always step 4. And step 4 kind of goes together with step 3. They're linked. So every time that a student points out a problem or something that could be better, they provide some type of solution, some type of suggestion. So they're not just sort of pointing out things that are wrong, they're providing useful, something useful for the student to take away. And I think that's really important when you think about it, because, you know, even in real life, like if someone sort of criticizes something you do, but doesn't really give you any kind of idea about how to do it better, that type of criticism is just not very useful. It's just not very constructive. And so I think getting students to sort of think about this kind of thing at the beginning and maybe just putting that ladder up on a slide or up on the board when they're doing the activity, just to remind them this is how they're supposed to do it, can really improve the quality of this type of activity. So we've been talking about how peer and self-assessment can help students increase their confidence, not only with the assessment criteria itself, but also just a feeling that they sort of are in control, that they understand how to succeed. That can be sort of an empowering feeling. And when you think about when you're giving feedback to a peer, that's also kind of empowering too. It makes you feel like you really, you know what you're doing. Oh, it's a good way to feel in an exam preparation class. So we're going to move on to talking about simulating exam conditions. So we started this talk by sort of focusing on the beginning of the course, focusing on supporting students with scaffolding and differentiation at the beginning of a course. But of course, at the end of the course, sort of when the exam date is coming, we really have to be taking any kind of support away, right? We want to be giving students practice with the exam tasks in the way that they're going to have to do them on the official exam, right? Because we want them to feel confident that they're performing well in class, but they will also perform well on exam day. And I think that teachers would normally I think we can all agree that's an important thing to do sort of at the end of an exam preparation course. And so I was just going to give you a couple of sort of ideas that I've sort of tried out with my students just to kind of simulate the exam a little bit more in class. And one is using sample mark sheets. So the ones you see on the screen here, these are sort of easily downloadable, again, from that Teachers Resource Center that I mentioned that you have access to with this course. There are lots of sort of exam preparation stuff in there that's very useful. And so, yeah, you can just sort of download these and give them to your students to use in class so that when they do a reading task, for example, they maybe circle the answers in their book or write them in their notebook, but then they transfer them to the mark sheet. And you might think, well, it's a little bit silly. And students might think, well, why am I doing this? But actually, it's very easy to make simple, silly mistakes with mark sheets. And I mean, I've watched students do it in class. They'll be sort of copying their answers, and they'll sort of, they won't be paying enough attention, and they'll sort of start writing a line down. So they're actually sort of writing the wrong answer for each one. This kind of thing happens, and we want to make sure that students make that kind of silly mistake in class rather than on exam day. And yeah, so I think that using this, you don't have to use it, for every class, every task you do in class, but introducing it or using it once in a while can be useful practice. And so I have a question for you about mark sheets. So when students are filling out mark sheets, sort of transferring their answers, should they be writing their answers in uppercase or lowercase letters? What would be better? What do you guys think? Okay, it seems like we're on the same page. Almost everybody has said uppercase, and that is the correct answer, if there is a correct answer. At least this is what the exam board suggests, because basically uppercase letters are just easier to read. I actually don't know anymore if a person or a computer is actually reading the answers that students write out now. I don't know that information. But when you think about it, it doesn't matter. It would be easier for a computer or a person. And you would sort of you would avoid the problem that Cambridge does have sometimes, is that students write an answer and they can't read it, and they can't mark something correct if they can't read it. So again, it's a good thing to sort of start introducing in class when you use the mark sheets, but even if you're just having them write their answers in their notebook, to get them to start thinking about writing their answers in uppercase could be a good idea. So the next one I want to talk about is official timing. And I know that most of you out there, I'm sure, are doing this already, particularly when you do a writing. If you're going to have students do an exam writing in class or even for homework at the end of a course, it makes a lot of sense to have them do it within the official timing. Because in my experience, it teaches students important things. In fact, I did a sort of a mock exam with an exam preparation course just the other day. And we were talking about it afterwards, and they say, "Oh, wow, yes, I didn't have enough time to read it before. I was writing my conclusion. You know, I wrote it in 5 minutes because I was running out of time." It sort of teaches students that, yeah, perhaps they need to sort of get through the writing a little bit faster. Maybe, obviously, the planning stage is very important, but making sure that there isn't sort of too much planning and that's taking too much time away from the writing, and sort of finding that balance between sort of planning and writing, and making sure that there is enough time at the end to read things over quickly, and you know, just correct any sort of little grammar errors or spelling mistakes that would be easy to eliminate yourself before you hand in the official before you hand it in. So as I said, I'm sure many of you are already doing this with writing, but I wonder how many teachers are doing it with listening. So that might seem kind of funny, but to think about. But when you think about it, on the day of the exam, students have a very specific amount of time to read the questions and the answers before the recording starts. And I think it's good to get students sort of into the habit of doing it within that timing, because we want to make sure that the exam strategies they're using in class are actually going to work on exam day. Because if they're spending sort of as much time as they want in class, sort of reading all the questions and the answers, and then on exam day they have much less time, then that's going to be kind of like a moment where they're like, you know, like it's going to be a surprise. We don't want surprises on official exam day, and it might affect their confidence as well, because they're effectively going to have to start using a different exam strategy on exam day than they're used to. So I have a question for you, which is, so this is from the advanced exam, from the C1 advanced exam. This is a listening part 3, multiple choice. There are 6 questions here, 4 answers each. How much time do you think students have to read all that information before the recording starts? So many people are saying 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Somebody says a few seconds. I've seen somebody say exactly the right answer. I'm very impressed. It's 70 seconds is the correct answer. And so that might seem like enough time, but it's not. If you try to do this as a teacher, it's hard. So you have 6 questions, and then you have 4 answers each. So that's sort of 6 plus 24. That's a lot. It's a lot of information to read. And you can't read all that in 70 seconds. So if you give students as much time as they want in class, that's what they're naturally going to do. They're going to read the question, they're going to read the answers, the question is. But they can't do that on exam day. The best that they can hope to do is to read the questions carefully, sort of underline some keywords there. And then if they have time, read some of those answers. But realistically, they're going to have to get used to the idea that they're going to have to be reading some of the answers while they're listening, that they won't have had time to completely read them carefully before the recording starts. And again, you know, if you want to think about this kind of thing, particularly towards the end of an exam preparation course, I think it's worth thinking about. It's worth making students aware of. And if you want to be kind of a giant nerd about this kind of thing, as I am, these are the official timings for all of the exam tasks on both this is the listening paper, of course, the B2 first exam and the C1 advanced exam. Yeah, you can say that it really depends a lot on the task, depends a lot on the exam. If you're curious, where it says no time for part 1 for B2 first, if you're familiar with the exam, you'll know that in that particular listening, there's just one question, and it's sort of one extract and one question. So that's why they don't give you any time, effectively. But yeah, as you can see, yeah, it's not a lot of time in general. And I think introducing a little bit of time pressure with the listening paper makes sense in class. And I think it also makes sense in other parts of the exam. So for example, with the reading and use of English, it's sort of a little bit hard to determine exactly how long you should spend on each task, but not giving students sort of as much time as they want is probably a good idea. I mean, if students are spending 20 minutes on a reading, they definitely are going to be taking valuable time away from another part of the exam if they do that on exam day. And actually running out of time and having to sort of rush through a few items at the end is very common on the reading and use of English paper. So I think getting students to, yeah, for example, do the reading and do the use of English tasks a little bit quicker towards the end of the course also makes a lot of sense. Again, to avoid sort of surprises. We don't want surprises on exam day. So that is my presentation. So we've looked at some scaffolding and differentiation techniques to use at the beginning of the course. We've done some peer and self-assessment related activities related to the writing in particular. And we also talked about simulating exam conditions. And yeah, just a final note on exam conditions. This is something you want to sort of focus on at the end of the course. Again, you don't want to do it at the beginning of the course because the whole point is familiarizing students and building their confidence at the beginning. So I hope this was useful for you today. And I'm going to finish with this activity, which if you've seen any of my other webinars, I like to finish with this. This is just to tell me in the chat box what stuck with you today. What ideas or activities do you think that you are going to sort of take with you and maybe try out in your classes? Something that's maybe new or interesting for you. Julia liked the ladder feedback. Yeah, Through is talking about using sort of official timing for the listening. More peer and maybe more peer review. Yeah, somebody's talking about the audio script. Seems like the latter feedback has been popular. I really encourage you to try that one out. You just have to Google it if you wanna find sort of the graphic that I used and stuff. Yeah, maybe using the audio script at the beginning to support students. I think the audio script in general is sort of an underused resource in listening lessons in general, not just in exam preparation. Okay, so with that, I think we can kind of move on to the question and answer session. So super, do you want to come back on and maybe we can just have a quick chat about maybe some of the questions that you wrote down? I've been paying as close attention to the chat box as I really should. I
no
find
problem.
it hard to
No worries.
multitask while I'm doing this. So I was wondering, do you want me to stop sharing my slides and we can just sort of be talking?
It's okay. Yeah, we can keep the slide on the screen to remind everybody to ask more questions if you still have. Yeah, and I will go through some of the questions that I have got from the Q&A session. So the first question, yeah, Ethan, yeah, drink some water. Yeah, hope you will get well soon. Yeah, teachers also send their regards in the chat box about your cough. So
yes, I think we've all had to finish a class with a cough. That's probably familiar for many teachers out there.
Yes, take care of your throat. Very important for teachers.
It is very important actually when you think about it. So it's
yeah. So my first question is from teacher Not sure about the pronunciation. Yeah, forgive me if not pronouncing right. Ali. So Ali asked, in some classes, in some cases, students' performance is better in class than in the exam. So how do we like help students to overcome that? What's the reason behind that?
Yeah, this is common. I mean, I think that the pressure of the exam probably affects students' performance, the nerves and everything. On official exam day, I mean, it just feels different, doesn't it? So I think that's one important factor. And as I said, so I think that sort of focusing on building student confidence, I think makes a lot of sense because of that reason that students are going to have to sort of face this moment of truth where they have to perform well under exam conditions. And as I said that, I think that getting students to do things within the exam timing can be important too, because I think that's another problem that students often find is that they sort of have less time than they're used to on exam day, which is one reason why I've started sort of simulating exam conditions in class. Yes. But yeah, I think that also, I think we need to make sure that we're sort of giving students tasks of the correct level of difficulty as well. I think that's one thing the Ready For series does well, is that sort of the tasks are a bit easier at the beginning. There's some scaffolding, but by the end, you know, the author Roy Norris, as you know, is a real expert at these exams, and they are the level of difficulty of the exam by the end of the book. And so, yeah, making sure that students do have enough practice with those really, you know, not really difficult, but the level of difficulty of the exam before they take it. I think that's key for sure.
Yes, thank you very much for your great answer. Yeah, hope Teacher Ali will get something from today's session from your answer. Yeah, about building students' confidence to help them perform like normal as possible. Yeah, as they are supposed to. And the second question is about peer assessment. So I've got a question from teacher, teacher Moody. So Teacher Moody asked, are there any other disadvantages in peer assessment? What we need to be like careful about peer assessment?
Yeah, so another sort of common problem with peer assessment is students don't assess their partner very well. Maybe they just haven't had enough practice or are enough, maybe their understanding of the assessment criteria isn't good enough. So they end up sort of telling their partner something that's not correct. So I think that that's one potential problem. But as I said, as sort of the way, you don't have to do it this way, but I always start with self-assessment, and I always get students really, you know, good at that first before I move on to peer assessment. And I think that by that point, you know, hopefully students do have a very good understanding of that assessment criteria because they've used it themselves to look at their own work. So I think that, yeah, taking steps and making sure students are ready for it. I think if you kind of throw them in the deep end, peer assessment can sort of fail. It's a difficult thing to ask students to do. But when you think about it, it's also, it's difficult because it's useful and important. Like that's like a useful life skill, being able to take and give constructive feedback. I mean, when you think about it, that's something that's going to help you succeed in your professional career.
Yes, I totally agree. And also making students comfortable about like assessing each other can help them develop their own knowledge of the criteria, and also to reflect on their own assessment as well. Yeah, that's definitely going to benefit them in the long run. Yeah, it might take some time, but it's good to do, worth trying. And the last question yeah.
Well, I was just going to say it's a time investment, but I think it pays off. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, have one question from an anonymous attendee asking about, can you recommend any like apps or resources that can help teachers and students in their online writing classes? Any tools or any like resources?
Yeah, so I teach a lot online, as I'm sure many of us do nowadays. And one program I've used a lot is Google Docs. So when I do an exam sort of style writing in class, I'll sort of put students in individual breakout rooms, each with their own Google Doc. But of course, that's shared with me. So while they're writing, I can be sort of switching between the Google Docs and seeing their progress. And when I see something that I think I can sort of make a suggestion about, then I sort of pop into that breakout room and we have a quick chat about the thing that it's like, well, your introduction is this big.
I'm able to present you various
of,
details and possibilities
maybe we could have
within the world of assessment.
Sorry, wait a minute. Alex, could you please, yeah, you're not muted, so sorry, we can hear you. Yeah.
No worries.
Yes. Yes, and we've got like a lot of questions actually in the Q&A chat, the box Q&A box, but we don't have time to answer them all. So while I'm introducing maybe the next session, if you have time, Ethan, you can have a look at the Q&A box. If you're willing to answer some of the questions, you can type the answers to the teachers because they're really, really curious about, yeah, about your topic, about assessment and exam. So yeah, please look at the Q&A box, and I will maybe move on to the next session and introduce teachers about, yeah, how to join the next sessions. So
okay.
Thank you very much, yeah, Ethan, for your great session and for your great like answers. It really is very like helpful, and I think teachers really benefited a lot from your informative, yeah, session. So thank you very much again. Thank you very much. So let's have a look at what we've got for you next. So yes. Check if you can, wait a minute, if you can see my slides in full screen. Yes. Okay, very good. So yeah, we have just had a great session from Ethan. In his session, he mentioned about like 3 tools to help teachers to help their students to develop confidence in the exam. It is really going to, yeah, help teachers to boost their students' energy and confidence. He has explored, let's have a quick review here. He has explored differentiation, the importance of making students familiar not only about the exam, but also about the exam conditions, right? And also Ethan explained the benefits of peer and self-assessment. That's going to be a time investment, but very worth trying, and it will pay off in the end. So all the examples Ethan has used are from this course, where Ethan is one of the authors. So this is the exam preparation course called Ready For, and now we have a brand new 4th edition ready for you in 2 levels. The one level is level C1, that preparing students for Cambridge advanced exam, and the level B2 is helping students with the B2 first certificate. So you will find these 2 levels available in the 4th edition of our best-selling exam courses. The course continues to provide an in-depth exam preparation training, and also has all the popular like features of the 3rd edition. It also includes updated reading and listening texts, new pronunciation sections, and improved page design for easy navigation. Not sure if teachers today you are using the 3rd edition or the previous editions. We now have this updated one with more like user-friendly stuff, updated stuff. And one of the exciting features of the 4th edition is a very comprehensive digital support. Some of the teachers mentioned if we have any resources or apps to help you teaching online for the exam preparation course. So we have prepared this digital support for you, both for students and teachers, including a student app. Yeah, as teachers mentioned, we have on-the-go practice with the student app that you can use, like very interactive, exam-focused practice at any time. And the course is also fully flexible, which means no matter you are teaching face-to-face or online, you all have the options, or a blended, like a session approach is also possible. So if you want to learn more about the course, you can go to macmillanenglish.com/ready for 4th edition.